Sup Shredders, my name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we've got ourselves 6 tracks off of an upcoming album from Ybenfy, titled Who Hurt You. And if we switch over to here, we've got ourselves the album here on SoundCloud here. Got the art up on the screen there. This is my first time listening through the music, but I look forward to checking it out. We're going to listen through each of these 6 tracks from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Starting with Op of 9, let's go. It's an interesting production style at this point. The crackle with the heavily modulated stylized instruments and vocals. When I go to sleep, yeah, lying in my bed, my mind's so sore from all the compulsions in my head. I start to think, full of possibilities. When I go to sleep, yeah, lying in my bed, my mind's so sore from all the compulsions in my head. Why can't necessarily sure how to interpret this one. It's kind of like they sound like someone. Is out to kill, I'm discovered. I'm always fucking hot, cause I have to go for it. 3 of those are shit with crimes. Every second away from dying, I be still be trying to run. So that was the first track off of this album, titled Op of 9. In each of these post-track sections, I'm going to provide an overall song analysis from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production. And at the end, there's going to be like an overall analysis of the 6 out of the 7 tracks we're doing today. But before we go any further, what do we think this track is about? Truthfully, I listened through this, and it almost kind of sounds like a fever dream to me. The way the vocals are represented, there's like voices going all over each other. There's whispers, kind of like washed out vocals, like in the ether. They're kind of spinning around the place. It's kind of difficult to discern exactly what's going on within it, and I think part of that is simply because it's not trying to be a direct conversation with the listener. It's more sort of insinuating a connection to maybe what they're going through internally in their head when they go to sleep. I think at some parts they were discussing kind of lying in bed, kind of going through these different thoughts. At other parts they were talking about being closer to death. So I kind of wonder whether Op of Nine is more about, it's discussing how we sort of assess our own mortality or how close we are to it. And the way that we're kind of reminded of it is in especially kind of difficult situations. It's an interesting, quite intense start to an album if that is the case, but I don't particularly mind that at all. I think music can be impactful and meaningful, regardless of the kind of tone that it goes with. And clearly it's something quite personal to Ybenfy. I think that I listened to the vocal performance there, and it's got some sort of flow with some of the cadences and the lines. It's more that it's very kind of free form at the same time. It's more trying to perform an atmospheric function rather than trying to be like a lead focal, like a main focal point. Everything kind of washes together in this 4 minutes of like an ether of different instrumental components, and it's just kind of, it's kind of almost sort of like trippy in a little bit of a way there, the way things can peter in and out there. I would say it's through composed there. There are some hooks, I think, but they're relatively subdued, and they're not trying to be sort of like a typical, like more upbeat or even an anti-hook at that point. The moment you get into this track, it's instantly quite intense with the way that you have those rolling kind of those kind of either key or sort of like string takes, and you have some arpeggios or like parts, but the melodies, in addition to the vocals, which have this like kind of intense high into them, but they sound kind of like they're being warped, and they float up and down and kind of had this almost sort of bendy kind of vibrato to them pitch-wise. And it's almost like we're kind of, okay, we're a bit out of it, you know? And when he just says, is it just me? You're just kind of left with everything else kind of surrounding that. The emptiness is harrowing. As you go through the piece, you have this additional kind of vinyl crackle, which implies maybe a sense of nostalgia that we're looking back on things. And we have these kind of chopped organs there that kind of heavily sort of tremolo there, and it's very like there are palatable melodies or sort of arpeggiated kind of harmonies by themselves, don't get me wrong. It's more the fact that they go back and forth between each other that makes it a little bit unsettling, especially with the way that things have been configured. We have some sort of fun bop 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 kind of synthesizers coming around the 55-second range there that, you know, perpetuate in different other parts of the track. And you do develop it, so it's good that we're sort of developing the piece and kind of adding more as we go along. And we add the 16th note kind of kicks and hi-hats and sort of snare patterns as we go along. I kind of appreciate that we didn't start with the percussion. We kind of maybe assessed that we already had enough going on in the early stages to not need more. And like, to be fair, it's already kind of like intense at the start there, so yeah, I feel like that balance was well considered. There are again moments such as around the 150 mark where like you simply have the synth by itself, for example, kind of beat booping around in the middle of the spectrum, and that's totally fine. You had storytelling by that point, so you've got enough to kind of figure out roughly what the track is about. And as we continue to expand before it, or afterwards, sorry, as we go through the piece, we continue to have more and more kind of like nuance sort of implemented. A second away from dying, but we'll still be trying to rock. I like the bit of vocal fry that we have on that part as well. It's kind of very earnest. We filter things at the 247 mark and kind of make it sound a bit more sort of washed out and change the flow and affectation of it. And having that moment at that 255 mark where things like go down and they're relatively more subdued is just kind of neat, partly because it's an even more intense like adjustment of dynamic range than we had prior. As we go through the piece towards its sort of like finale, you have the more kind of like chopping and more kind of fragmentation of the initial instruments, and you effectively are left not really knowing what we're going to have for the rest of the album, but nonetheless feeling kind of fascinated by it. Like things kind of, they float there and they skitter and scatter, and there's a bit of distortion or gain on drive on it as well to kind of like, to boost things. But I just think ultimately it's the track itself flows quite seamlessly through. The 4 minutes goes by really quickly. There's no filler. Thematically, it's a minor chord leaning, but there's nothing note-wise that is particularly harsh about it. It's just more unsettling, partially due to the way that things have been done in post. You know, like you've had these sort of more sort of straightforward tones and textures and timbres that have had effects chains placed on them to kind of elevate or sort of manipulate or mutate them. I think that's kind of what's providing a different kind of ambiance to this, past simply the minor leading of the sadness. And it kind of elicits a more sort of like arguably suitable feeling or relatability to what's been discussed in the vocals. But I think that the way that you kind of float between those notes is actually rather clever, and we make great use of the 4 minutes again because of the different interpretations of the main bass lines and the harmonies. The studio recording, mixing and mastering. Initially, I was unsure about the way that things amalgamated, but I think that actually the way that we have the vocals nice and sort of fresh on top of the mix is good. The way, when we consider what they're discussing in terms of subject matter, the way that they're not super kind of, there's not a body to it. It's either kind of filtered to only have a lot of the high end, or it's relatively quiet in comparison. I think that's sensible. The leveling in general is nice. There was some interesting panning decisions with like the way things were presented in the stereo field. The synth, for example, in that midsection kind of floated in the center and kind of spread out a little bit, which is kind of neat. The music surrounds you in the headphones, no weird resonant frequencies. In the frequency spectrum, nice and loud, bit of pumping with the percussion, but not too much. The percussion was part of the noise as well. And yeah, honestly, quite a cool start to proceedings. We got I Owe You, track number 2. Similar tone, maybe similar. Oh, that's really surreal. It's kind of distracting, but then with what's provided in the first track, it makes sense with the wheels on the side. Now, to be fair, there are mid-range resonances. I should amend what I said prior on the previous track. But they're like deliberate, and they don't cause a resonance in the master chain, if that makes sense. sad for someone to feel like they owe them for love. I mean, it's just sad to think that someone owes him for love. So I think that's maybe what I owe you is talking about. He talks about his mother, and I'm not entirely sure. I didn't get the full context to that. Maybe there's some things that happened at home that weren't particularly good. I'm only minimizing that because I'm not sure. I'd have to listen through it again to kind of get the nuance of it. But like for me, what kind of really did kind of hit home is when we talked about, again, like there was some sort of self-harm stuff that was discussed there, some real trouble, should I say, that we were going through and discussing, and almost like we felt worthless and we didn't feel like that we were enough for someone. And it's brutal to listen to someone go through that. It's always tricky when I listen to music like this because I feel instantly empathetic towards the person that I'm listening to. But I think for a lot of people, this is like music is a release, right? It's a way of discussing what they're going through as well as something they're going through. So I think it's important to talk about it. But yeah, I really do hope that if they are feeling this way, they get the help that they need, you know? I mean, you shouldn't say that you mean it in a genuine way, but I do. It just because sometimes you can, I don't know. We'll move on from that. Basically, I think that we're looking at our own sense of worth, wondering if we owe someone for them loving us, and it just sounds kind of like a toxic situation, but then a whole lot of it sounds sort of internalized again because of the way that we're kind of following a similar process of processing the vocals to the previous part. I did like the use of melody in some of these parts. There was also good repetition of different words and lines and stuff to kind of instantiate and get them stuck in the listener's head, which was good, effective, you know. And for the most part, the words came through clearly in a way that, again, was tonally consistent with the previous track Up of 9, which I think is just a sensible decision there, because when things sound similar across an album, it just makes it sound a little bit more cohesive. There's a lot more going on than just the vocals, but I feel like they told an impactful story that was niched well across the 4 minutes 10. And it was and expression-wise, it was very kind of like authentic and earnest. Like, don't seem like we're kind of reaching to feel these things. It's something that's kind of very kind of deep for us in a way that, like, yeah, no, we're actually going through it. The track though starts with those kind of flourishes, those ping pong delash kind of pads and stuff, the kind of lo-fi aesthetic, the kind of synthish kind of like leads there that are more sort of like atmospheric devices rather than leads or basses. You had like a very kind of gentle, chilled kind of boom, boom, that could be a sort of a modulated guitar or something like that, which is kind of cool. But as we go through the piece, these pads spread out on the side there, and it starts to sound huge. And you have further plucks that go up the frequency spectrum, and you're kind of wondering where we're ascending to. And we have this kind of weird finality to some of the way that those sort of kind of like midi-ish triads kind of end. I do like the fact that eventually around the 135 mark, you get to a point where the track just kind of skitters in and outside of each other. You know, you have like different parts coming in, filling in little gaps within the motif. And those are things that come through via the development of the piece up until that point. But like, you know, I mentioned before during the review, there was like a resonant frequency or something along those lines, but that it was done on purpose and wasn't an effect and master. I think it was like a kind of a transitional dynamic device more than anything else. It's kind of that kind of tone that you kind of cling on to immediately. Like, wait, what is that? And then boom, the drums coming over top and things seem well chained. It's clever production, to be fair, but it's just the kind of journey you have with it motively as well. And it's interesting because around the, you know, past the 2-minute mark, there are a lot of things that are repeated and you kind of become very familiar with that style of sort of riff or idea that they're playing there. You know, it becomes almost like a point of comfort despite the struggle that they're going through. And again, as we get near the end of the piece there, we have less of the drums. The bell curve kind of comes down a little bit more slowly there. With a mixture of really interesting drums, by the way, when they are there. You do have sort of like 16-note patterns, but they're not constant 16ths. We have little rests and stuff like that, non-beats and syncopated. The kicks and claps and whatever we have else there is really neat as well. I just appreciate that we were not afraid to have a bit of adjustment of the rhythm and not just stick with the main 4. But then we also knew to take the drums away at the end there with those little like riffs and harmonies kind of like ascending and sort of spinning around over top. We knew that we didn't need to have it kind of punchy at that point. So we understand the nuance required there in order to make compelling music and to not have everything all the time effectively. Thematically though, it's minor key oriented, but it's almost kind of meditative in its approach. It's music where like it seems like you're again internalizing and sort of like trying to sort of like sync things up, but at the same time you're also wondering where we're going with this. It's kind of a very sort of sophisticated form of minor where it's not too on the nose, but it's also not trying to be too overcomplicated. These tracks are made up of a bunch of different individual components that either sort of like simmer in and out of each other, or they kind of come in and out over time and sort of like present their case and then leave. But I do like that even with the post-production that the drums are kind of filtered, that when we have again resonant frequencies, they're done in the mix as opposed to the master. Music surrounds you in the headphones. I think that again, the vocal processing with the way that it focuses on a quieter kind of delivery with compression, the reverb towers and stuff is kind of cool. And most of the elements that we have within this, regardless of if they're in the center of the stereo field or on the sides, are stylized and approached in a way that is more deliberately, I think, Ybenfy style. Because I haven't really listened to much music like this. I feel like they have something really cool going on that's kind of unique. And ultimately, you go through this, you don't have any complaints about the way things have been labeled or sort of like mastered or anything like that. And it's 2 for 2. Track 3 though, Forreal. So is this major key oriented? That's kind of nice.
You put me down for real. You care how I feel. You put me down for real. You put me down. You put me down for real. You care how I feel. You put me down for real. You put me down, down. You don't get to rest. Now you don't get the best. Now you don't get to rest. Fuck that, you don't get the best. Shit, you don't get to rest. If I'm still traumatized after death, if I'm a tear away from meth, then I spit on your last breath. Now you don't get to rest, and you definitely deserve the best. Now you don't get to rest. Now you don't get the best. Shit, you were supposed to let me. I felt like a captive. How you own me? No, those nights I'm feeling lonely. Question how the fuck you claim you were holy.
I don't mind it. I mean, like, I know the subject matter's heavy, but
All I craved, had to cover myself and say, be brave. Be brave. Be brave. Be brave.
okay, so that was Forreal, track number 3 for today off of the Who Hurt You album. I think that this one is more discussing the fact that this person's really hurt you. And so after what occurred with I Owe You, we're in a state now where we're kind of going, no, actually, I've realized that you've been taking the piss. a little bit, you know, if not a lot. And we talk about there's more ideation, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. And we're really affected by this person negatively. And what's kind of interesting about the way that it's delivered is that the vocals, they sound tired, and in the sense that they are going through a lot, and they seem like they've had some trials and tribulations, and that seems authentic. And it's just this trumpet in the background, these trumpets or saxophones or brass. I wasn't initially like fully vibing with the major key once I heard the lyrics, but the trumpets kind of allude to a feeling of things not being quite as they seem, because of the way that they kind of clash or rub up weirdly against the chord progression that's there. I think that's kind of clever in a sense, because it doesn't just make it a pure everything's in the major key, but we're talking about, you know, severe depression kind of thing. The track starts with these heavy pads and keys, though, again reminiscent of what I had prior, so a consistency with the way things are sort of like sounding. But we have this 3-note bass line that kind of emanates, and there's this interesting sort of flourish to the track there that makes it almost seem sort of misty and even more introspective. And as we get the vocals come in and we're kind of working through things in our like chest voice, it's very somber sounding. We have the brass come in at other parts, either call and responding, or so, you know, at the very least call and responding with the vocals. And it's almost like at that stage we're like, okay, are these trumpets playing in response to what we're discussing here? Because again, they do kind of behave well with the chord progression, but there are just some notes that are deliberately dissonant, I think, that kind of make things a bit sort of otherworldly there and kind of reflect more of a connection or like a mutation or degradation in regard to what the vocals are alluding to. Like things seemed okay, but they really weren't. Because if you don't listen to the lyrics, it's kind of a little bit kind of weird and almost kind of like quirky, but then, you know, that's why you've got to actively listen to it to kind of get the full picture. And as the drums come in, you know, like and kind of perpetuate throughout the piece there, you've got a mixture of quarters and eighths and 16th grooves across the different sort of parts of the kit. And it's just this kind of halftime feel to it where we are kind of stumbling through it there. And as the vocals kind of go freeform, either sticking in time with the percussion as per other tracks within this album, or like kind of doing their own thing and being a bit more kind of organic, it is really interesting to kind of hear how we kind of sort of steer away from it occasionally. I think, again, it was good to have the drums kind of stop at that end point, though, just to kind of allow ourselves to sit with the previously kind of instantiated harmonic elements in that mid-range there, and to kind of absorb the kind of genesis of it, with those kind of ping-pongy kind of effects at the end there, kind of letting us know that maybe the audio transmission is over, even though we're halfway done. But it's just crazy how much real estate we get out of those kind of brass parts, because of the variety of the different ways that the vocalist communicates, and also because of how unconventional the combination of those parts is in terms of like the subject matter with the chord progression and stuff like that. You're kind of wondering whether things are going to end out more positively at the end, but we never know. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering in general, as per the other two tracks, is really good. I like the way that flows. I think that in general, the lyrics consistently with the use of the brass and the very kind of true, it's a very kind of old school MIDI tone to the saxophones and trumpets and stuff like that, which kind of, again, adds a bit of kind of, again, that quirkiness I mentioned to it. But it's just the way that the vocals are so washed out and how they present themselves. With also the kind of how chipper the drums are when they come in. There's just a lot of interesting sounds there. And I know I've mentioned that in prior tracks, but keep mentioning that it's consistent. Ultimately, I just think if there was anything from the studio production I wanted to mention, it would specifically be the choice of instruments and their sounds and how they integrate there. I think it's neat. You could have maybe had like a different trumpet tone, and it might have just been a little bit too on the nose in terms of the subject matter, but you know, it's cool. We have track 4 for today, Solo.
Heaven is not what you see, but what you believe. All of heaven is not what you see, but what you believe.
Interesting vocal modulation here.
Will I ever see you again? Will I ever see you again? There's flaws in the dark and the light, but I've given all I have left in this fight. Will I ever see you again after tonight? Solo, I don't wanna be solo. I just want my family with me.
thump to that kick. I wonder if this is kind of this is like a therapy for Ybenfy, you know, kind of getting their things out in the open. I would assume that would be the case.
Will I ever see you again? Will I ever see you again? There's flows of dark and light, but I've given all I have left in this fight. Will I ever see you again after tonight?
Great use of alternate vocal chops there, eh? I like the heavy distortion on it. Interesting stylization. A very sort of pensive play out on that key there. Nice. So that was Solo. I get the feeling that after the happenings of Forreal, and I should note there was also Wasteland, which we aren't checking out today. We're just going to do Solo, Who Hurt You, and Peppermint. With Solo, I think that this is effectively leaving the person that made us feel a certain way, because we realized that that situation was not good for us, and we still love this person, and we're still kind of figuring out what we're going to do. But it's kind of looking at things in isolation. I think there's one part where we kind of look back on how things would have been. Maybe we're even sort of like romanticizing how things used to be in that part where the vocals change texture and tone and stuff like that around like the second third of it. But ultimately, yeah, it's an interesting tale, and it shows a development thematically through the album, which I appreciate. We have an adjustment of the main sort of vocal lead at this point. We have some really heavily kind of like filtered vocal parts at the start there, which are upper pitch, and I'm wondering if it's just our voice that we've done something differently with to kind of put it up an octave or two, and if we're coming back down afterwards. I think either way it's fine. We also have some vocal chops that kind of decorate the piece quite neatly, and it's nice to have an additional bit of color there. I think that's kind of neat. Like, I like listening to Ybenfy, but it's also good to have something to kind of either call and respond or go alongside it and harmonize. Especially as most of the parts in this spoken bit are non-melodic and more sort of rhythmic, I suppose, in orient. So ultimately, it's good to have a bit more range there. The track starts with some keys there, some electric keys, and they play these really kind of pretty sounding extensions there in the mid-range there. That sounds very peaceful, I think. Almost seeming like we've found a sense of ease with things, because these tracks all of these are practically through composed. I haven't really been as like literal about mentioning it every single time. It's just they're more sort of experiences as opposed to trying to sort of create more sort of like contemporary, like typically kind of structured, verse chorus pieces. You have a mixture of those different pads as well that we've had in previous tracks. And we have the drums come in a little bit later on with some 16th note sort of like grooves there, with occasional rests as well, just to kind of chop things up and make them a bit more sort of stimulating. And they're kind of, again, they're affected so that they're not as literal with the hits of them, and they're not as sharp sounding there. Kind of that lo-fi aesthetic is implemented quite well throughout this album thus far. And we have a bit of that kind of warbling and warping of things as well there, which is kind of neat, again, giving it that kind of vinyl nostalgic feel. And that kind of, with these little pops that happen occasionally as well, it kind of presents its sort of main sort of atmosphere within the first 30 seconds and continues to oscillate around that as we go through. It does sound a bit more pure later on when we sort of reduce some of the percussive elements there. It's kind of graceful how the keys sort of like just sit there and with the mood, but as we go into that higher filtered part there, completely getting rid, or mostly getting rid of like the low end there, it just seems like we're rising into something else. Before we go back down into the 155 second mark where we have those basses come in and then those strings there, we're reintroduced to a lot of what we had prior. It's almost like we were crescendoing or sort of rising into some other sort of plane, then we're coming back down to earth at that stage. It almost kind of works almost like another instrumental layer having those vocal chops in that last part though. It's quite a short track to be fair at 2 minutes 44. You know, it's not that long. And I kind of appreciate the fact that it's a shorter piece there that we can do. The slightly longer ones outside of the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot. And the ones that are more sort of a single length. I feel like we get the subject matter across that we need to without missing anything important there. I just think ultimately we have enough instrumental variety there with the different percussive bass, sort of string pad key elements there. Decorating the frequency spectrum, I think mostly in full. There's a nice shimmer and sheen up top, sort of like compositionally. Without being too much low range. We're not too weighed down, which is an interesting sort of like decision here. I think that's, again, part of the drums being processed the way they are, is that it avoids too much sort of like weight to it. It side chains, but it doesn't like boost the subs or anything like that. At least not in this one. Maybe in the previous track there's a bit more of a thump, but not in this one as much. It's a bit more kind of like airy. Thematically, it's major oriented, but like it's an extension, so therefore there's more of a kind of a nuance the way that it's presented. It's more sort of peaceful, I think, in part because of some of the tones and textures that we include within it, but ultimately there is almost kind of jazzy in its inference there, sort of like inferring a sense of sort of emotional complication to it. Like we understand we needed to be alone, but we're also kind of like accepting that it's difficult to do so, and that we're kind of having to sort of work through things on our own for a bit. But just interesting production decisions with what's happening at the 138 mark. Again, I dig how we kind of had things kind of rise in that respect there. We weren't just reliant on the core tones or core sounds that we had within the songwriting parts. And again, like the use of the vocal chops plus the main parts plus the pitch shifting at the start, maybe for another person's perspective, is interesting. And the leveling, sort of like no resonant frequencies, etc. The production quality is solid across this album, albeit with a few changes and individual kind of like articulations per track that help to have them individually stand out. Nice and loud, bit of side chaining, pumping, bass compression, limiting is handled, and we're doing really well. We've got Who Hurt You, track number 5 for today. I wonder how they're getting that tone on the piano. Cool to have the hand drums as not the percussion this one.
Who hurt you? I'm sorry I wasn't there. Who hurt you? Your eyes are full of despair. Who hurt you? I only see sleep when the sun comes to. Or where you think the world stopped loving you. Yeah, and I don't want it to be true. But tell me who hurt you? Up at anyone when it comes to you. I'm not overbearing, this isn't a dispute. Even if something can now, I'd find the root and excavate till I hit Beirut. From land to the sea, yo, I'd gladly shoot. Just tell me who hurt you. wasn't there. Just tell me who hurt you. Your eyes are full of despair. Who hurt you? Only see you sleep when the sun comes to. I'm worried you think the world will stop loving you, son. And I don't want it to be true. Please, tell me who hurt you.
So that was Who Hurt You, track number 5 for today, from the Who Hurt You EP. So that's interesting that we're getting to the self-titled at this stage. They've heard all the context beforehand, and now we're kind of talking to someone else and going, hey, who are you? You know, who hurt you? What's happened here? If you know, I'm not trying to be overbearing, but whoever did this to you, their face will be turned blue. You know, I'm not sure if this is a conversation with themselves or like someone else they knew. It's an interesting kind of like situation that they're in, where we're sort of identifying now the toxic behaviors after being solo for a while, and we're now going, actually, no, we don't want that or need that. We shouldn't have that, and we're not going to tolerate it anymore. It's a very kind of solemn, chilled conversation that we have there. Like a kind of a quiet, calm anger. And the expression is interesting. It's like, it's an unusual way of doing music, but I feel like it works because it's so kind of like chill to listen to. Like, it's difficult to kind of process and you feel for them, but at the same time, it's like it's so effective. Really solid sort of storytelling, again, with the repetition of things without needing to over-articulate with melodies and harmonies and stuff like that. It's far less busy in terms of lead layers than the previous track. And I think that it makes good use of the 4 minutes 05. There's like 30 seconds or 35 seconds at the start of this kind of piano solo that we have there. That's very kind of pretty sounding. I don't know how they're processing it, whether it's like a little piano that they recorded and doing stuff with, or if they're using like synthesizers or like keys or something like that. But regardless, I think it might be the case. There might even be like an additional instrument that's providing a sub harmony to it, like not sub bass, but like an additional kind of like bit of kind of body to it, or mistiness or airiness to it, I'm not sure. But it's very kind of peaceful sounding in a way where I think we're in a positive place, being able to associate that the harm that's been done is something that needs to be rectified, as opposed to accepted. I just think structurally as well, it's kind of interesting to just have the piano solo at the start. Like, we've had some tracks within this album so far which have been pretty keen to get the vocals in like almost immediately, and to know that at this point the listener's probably going to allow us to take our time with it is good self-awareness. I think the use of the hand drums, like structurally after that piano solo at the beginning, is kind of neat. It's kind of cool to have an alternative form of percussion than the hi-hats, kicks, and snares that we've had thus far. It's just nice to sort of explore different sort of options in regard to that. We have a lot of those kind of similar kind of pad textures that we had in previous tracks, and we kind of have the flutters and sort of tremolos. We have other bits as well, but the bass kind of permeating in amongst, again, the different hand drums, the djembes and bongos and stuff like that. There's also like a swing groove to it, which is kind of nice, like we're kind of slow dancing through it, dun 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 dun, and it makes it a bit more sort of playful in a weird way, I suppose. We have the Who Hurt You line and other bits associated, repeated throughout the piece there, within the different sort of like combinations of instrumental elements. And you know, he's talking to his son, you know, who hurt you, and he's just trying to figure out what happened. He's trying to find a solution to it. And as you kind of like hear them continue to kind of reiterate this, you eventually get to a point where things kind of wash out in a similar way to the previous track, where there was like mainly it's like high end, with the bass kind of like beat booping in the bottom there with some sequencer kind of stuff. And you're just almost wondering how this is going to close at this point with Peppermint. It's just ultimately a piece where you feel like they're kind of turning a corner in regard to the way they're understanding their own situation and the journey we're having. But like, we're still the same person with the same sort of like kind of character, I suppose. It's just that we're more so becoming major than minor oriented in terms of key signature. I mean, thematically, yeah, it's a major key. It's a very kind of pleasant sort of sounding chord, especially with the kind of effects modulated honky tonk piano that we have, kind of zip zap. And it's also that, again, the swing groove that makes it a bit more sort of relaxed, I suppose, with the slower tempo. Yeah, neat with the it's neat with those combination of elements there. I think the use of more traditional sort of like major triad is nice because it doesn't represent that we're as complicated or conflicted with our feelings on needing to rectify this stuff. I think that in terms of the studio production side of things, it's great to have the leveling as is, the vocals before the way they are. I think having the key solo at the start there, but having it like in a way where it's not too quiet or not too loud is important there. It kind of sets a kind of a connection to the previous tracks in regards to how it sounds, and then it continues to feature throughout the rest of the track so that it connects more with the vocals. No weird resonant freezes in the frequency spectrum. Music surrounds you in the headphones, nice and loud. Bit of pumping from like the hand drums and stuff like that, but not too much. It's not trying to be a house track in this one. And ultimately, again, it was just nice to have that resonance in the high end at the end there, as well as deliberate EQing of different instruments to have them specifically niche within different parts. Ultimately, just, yeah, really good. They clearly know what they're doing. This is very promising. And we've got Peppermint, track number 6 for today. Final track on the album. Oh, the panning and the way they go between the sides is kind of like very kind of trippy.
Alright, here we go from now. I think I'm going up vomit. I'm suffering from this problem that I always feel sick. And just living's making me nauseous. I swear I'm tired of living cautious. I lock all the doors constantly cause I'm scared. But I'm not scared at the same time. And I'm tired of being jobless. Can't trust you, sorry. You never done shit for me anyway. Or maybe I just don't remember the good times. I mean, I do get texts from people saying call us. I fucking hate being high all the time. That's not a joke. I did it for 5 months straight every day. And I'm tired of living lawless. Have to put a peppermint in. I'm out this feeling sweet again. I hate the stripes of red and white, but I need a suppressor day and night. And if I could, I'd try something new. I'd cover my black ass in 1,000 tattoos. I would bleed into you, saw my flesh, but with a mint, my breath is fresh. Minty fresh, minty fresh. I'm always a person, sometimes I'm on for death. But at least my breath is minty fresh. Minty fresh, minty fresh. I'm always depressed and sometimes I long for death. But at least my breath is minty fresh. Minty fresh, minty fresh. I'm always depressed and sometimes I long for death. But at least my breath is minty fresh. Minty fresh, minty fresh. I'm always depressed and sometimes I long for death. But at least my breath is minty fresh. Minty fresh, minty fresh. I'm always depressed and sometimes I long for death. But at least my breath is minty fresh. I can't feel nothing, I'm so suffering. Minty fresh, minty fresh. I'm always depressed and sometimes I long for death.
We're going to the right side next.
Peppermint in. I'm out this feeling sweet again. I hate the stripes of red and white, but I need a suppressor day and night. And if I could, I'd try something new. I'd cover my black ass in 1,000 tattoos. I would bleed into you, saw my flesh, but with a mint, my breath is fresh.
It's kind of like a haunting way to end things, isn't it? You know, suffering from addiction, having to sort of constantly have peppermints to kind of keep the taste in our mouth away from sort of like distracting us from other things, you know? Alright, so I think that this last track titled Peppermint, is, as I mentioned just prior, it's more about someone coping with the aftermath of maybe the abuse or the difficult situations they went through, just their life in general, and having to constantly eat peppermints in order to, like, they want to do whatever they can to have what they want, but in the meantime, the most they can do is eat those peppermints because that's the thing kind of holding them together day and night. At least their breath is minty fresh. It's that like one thing that they can control, because if they don't have it, then what do they have? It's an interesting thing to talk about. I've never really heard an ending to an album like this that's been about this kind of stuff, and I actually do have a lot of respect for that. I think that it's interesting to try a different angle, but one that's also clearly very impactful and important to Ybenfy. So I hear this and I go, okay, so we understand what the story is about. We understand how things are concluding. There are moments where we have more of a kind of like a direct conversation with the listener. And there are other points where we kind of approach it on the sides of the stereo field asymmetrically. There are moments where we have like a kind of a phone call filter on our voice there to almost seem like we're on the phone with someone after they said call us. And then we have the vocals come through on the other side as well. And they're even more sort of like heavily filtered and kind of distorted and kind of bit crushed. And then effectively just kind of left in a position where you've had all these conflicting emotions and thoughts going around in your head there, and you've heard them entirely. And you feel like this was more, again, it was more Ybenfy sharing these things, getting them out off their chest there, putting them into musical format in a way where it works. And I think before I move on to the actual structure of the piece, it's actually very difficult to do that in a way where the music will, you know, actually facilitate having a conversation or a monologue on top. So I have to sort of show respect for the fact that we're able to get like a backing atmospherically, musically, to suit what we were discussing. You know, there are adjustments to the way the music interacts with the listener. A lot of the start of this piece, you know, at 3 minutes 51, is those kind of pads going in and out and fluctuating like that, and it's very surreal to listen to. You can feel the music kind of squirm and wriggle and writhe and out. And as that continues and the vocals come in, you almost feel like what we're discussing are those thoughts. The music is the thoughts in our head kind of writhing around like that. As we have a very kind of subtle riser come in, like around the 1 minute mark, more noticeable, you feel like you are building in something. As we kind of have a bit more kind of tension there and grit to it with the filtered vocals, it's very kind of surreal just how much or how little we have actually. Because there are note choices again with the way that the synthesizer and sort of surrounding elements work there, but it's almost kind of neutral in its approach there. It's like major key oriented, like thematically, but it's when you can hear it, when you couple it with what's being spoken about, it's almost a little bit disconcerting. Around the 2 minute mark though is where stuff gets really interesting, primarily because you have additional kind of like shimmery and kind of chimey elements come in, and it just sounds gorgeous. It's beautiful how things expand there. The kind of dreaminess of it is like effervescent, almost like we've just had the peppermint and now we are actually kind of like enjoying our time with that and we've gotten a hold of it, you know. And as the vocals overlap each other and it becomes more of a kind of a mist, it's just very kind of, it's almost like we're trying to be led into the experience that Ybenfy has. That goes away a little bit later on. He has some sort of like flurries and legato passages, some like subleads and stuff like that. Like there's a flute or something like that that's kind of like trilling around. And as we go to the end of the piece there, you simply have, again, like those kind of melodic and harmonic mid-range components kind of flying us out. But it's kind of surreal because we don't really necessarily get a thematic ending to it that's particularly like, it's almost like we're just kind of accepting reality of having to sort of have these peppermints as much as we can. We leave the track on this unresolved note and we're done. And that's the EP, or the album should I say. And I think it's kind of accurate in a sense because it doesn't seem like we come to a true solution at any extent. We're just still kind of working things out and doing the best we can to get through things day by day after being high for 5 months straight. So I think if we compare, you know, like how this track works with others, it's almost like we're in this kind of like place psychologically where we've gone through a lot of the heaviness now, or I'm also kind of like in a stage afterward where things are still an ideal and maybe a bit less kind of like ideated, but we're just kind of coming to an acceptance of it now, I suppose, maybe potentially an unconditional acceptance of it. I don't think we needed to have drums in this. I think that effectively the track works well without a sense of percussion or pace to it. It's just, you know, having things still have rhythmic, like an orient to it, but in a less sort of sharp way. And ultimately, I think thematically, just with those combinations of instruments, you know, included, you feel like if you weren't aware of the lyrics, you'd be like, well, this is a thoroughly pleasant experience listening through this. but it's almost like we're making the best of a kind of a less desirable situation when you include everything else. So there's two different ways to sort of like, there's a lot of depth and dimensionality to this piece, but just the way that at that halfway point as we have more context, it just explodes there. It's just really beautiful. Like, it's dazzling. I really enjoyed that. This is probably my favorite track off the album. And ultimately, yeah, I think the major learning makes sense because we're kind of happy for what we have to a certain extent. Even as some of the notes and some of these parts meander about and kind of come in a way which isn't particularly kind of like, we're not trying to sort of like really stick the landing with the key totally. It's still very kind of like pretty. Studio recording, mixing and mastering in general, the way things are like leveled, you know, mix, master, etc. are really tight. Vocals come in, different interpretations of those. Great use of panning, both the automation of the pans pads that we had at the start, as well as the vocals being again symmetrically on the side as well as in the center there, and then they go out to the right as well later on. They're great sort of placement and awareness of how to sort of fill that out. There's dynamic range to this. Things aren't too squeezed, nice and loud. No pumping because of a lack of drums, but like the vocals were well heard, had great presence. And ultimately, yeah, it was a really interesting time with this album today, but we're going to talk about more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this album from Ybenfy, titled Who Hurt You. In this section, we're going to provide an overall album analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through to studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. I should note that I'm not going to be doing specific kind of like per track stuff in this part, as I've already put little mini song conclusions after each of them, so if you want to check those out, feel free to do so. Before we go any further, what do we think this album is about? My take of tracks, you know, Op 9, IOU, Forreal, Solo, Who Hurt You, and Peppermint, are that they are reflecting someone who has gone through some really difficult situations, has a lower sense of self-worth, has been struggling with depression, ideation as well. We have potentially had a codependent relationship with someone where it's been gotten kind of toxic. We've been trying to go out on our own and we've been trying to get high to cope with things, but we're trying to now sort of eat peppermints in order to sort of distract ourselves from how difficult things are. And I think ultimately, when you combine all these different elements, it's a very sort of like organic, honest sort of like output from a musician that is both capable of really sort of solid storytelling. Because most of it is spoken. Some of it is kind of rapped and some of it is kind of like sung, but like very, very little of it. It's not about trying to have the vocals as like a really kind of energetic, kind of like exciting lead more so. It is about it being kind of like an earnest kind of like output, our kind of at our mission of what we've been going through. And I think that when you consider the subject matter makes total sense. This doesn't need to be a track which is super high octane, super hyperactive or anything like that. It wouldn't make sense unless like we were manic or something like that. I think effectively it's someone trying to keep it together. There is lots of different ways that the vocals are sort of like presented. You have some vocal chops as more sort of melodic parts in certain tracks. Usually it's like kind of like more sort of like straightforward filtered vocals there with more of a focus on the high end and mids there. Some parts get a bit more kind of like up there further there. We kind of cut and filter things. But ultimately, yeah, the vocals are typically presentable. And I think that we even sort of pitch shift or sort of modulate occasionally, sort of like have different perspectives. But you hear the words clearly for the most part, and I think that all in all, it seems again like authentic for what we're trying to discuss. The tracks themselves are typically between 2.5 and 4.5 minutes, and I find that's a good length for them. There were never any tracks where I felt like there were any filler. They're usually through composed, so they don't have like verses and choruses and stuff like that. It's more about the journey you go on through each of the tracks with Ybenfy kind of hearing their truth, as well as all the other various instrumental components that are presented within them. Because there are a lot. There's a lot of different sort of like strings and pads and keys and some basses and some drums. And if I was to go through each of those individual components, which I'm going through, they each serve a sort of a core functional purpose. I think the synth parts that we have are more sort of be kind of like this lo-fi, vinyl, vintage, nostalgic feel. That they're not super modern sounding. Some of them have this kind of vinyl crackle to them. If they're pads or they're sequences, they're very sort of occasional things as well, unless they're whole notes, kind of like creating a chord or like a unison note or like a root note behind some of the main parts. They perform a similar function to some of the bass lines where, sure, some of the basses are kind of like sequence, but most of the time they kind of roll with the root notes and sort of try to support things from the low end as well and fill out the frequency spectrum in a way that's quite well behaved. The keys that we have, like there's some songs there's one of the songs that had like a piano, it's kind of like solo at the start, which was kind of neat there. And I appreciate that we weren't like afraid of letting another instrument sort of like have its time in the sun even for 30 seconds. I like the fact that we're comfortable as well with having the drums have a variety of different sort of like sort of hi-hat grooves there. We're very comfortable with our constant 16ths as well as having rests in between them occasionally. We have our sort of kicks and our claps there, and they're very kind of like steady in the way they present. But we also had like a swingish kind of hand drumish component there in one of the tracks, which was really neat. It's just nice to have an adjustment to flow away from the 4/4 and sort of allow things to kind of be a bit more kind of like a dance as opposed to like a confession. Getting back to the keys though, because I got distracted a little bit. Like the keys are primarily either like arpeggiating different chords to make melodies, or they're extensions, chord extensions. So we had some electric keys as well as pianos and stuff. There was this kind of honky-tonkish kind of like warble to the pitch of them as well, which made it seem a little bit kind of like psychedelic in a way. But I think some of that's also the chorus that we have, as well as some of the little tremolo on parts. And it worked in a similar way to a lot of other instruments within the track, where they were stylized in a way to make them seem less sort of like solid. They had, again, that warbling, that pitch-wise. Some of the trumpet and brass takes as well were very kind of like old school, kind of midi-ish kind of like styling to them, which kind of gave them more of a kind of a retro feel, which is kind of neat. Maybe we'll look on back on things within those tracks as well. And so effectively, I think it's not just the various rhythms that implemented chord as A16, sort of on-beat syncopated straight 4/4 or swings, or like the arpeggios of the major minors, extensions, etc. It's also the way they sound, the tones and timbres, and how they were chosen from both a compositional production perspective. Ultimately, though, I think you have some string parts, you have some pads, you have occasional risers, you have kind of like alt leads and vocal chops and other bits of ear candy that I probably haven't mentioned. And effectively, you kind of combine all those different elements, bring them out on different tracks, have a natural sort of bell curve for most of these songs where things aren't the same all the time, have moments of like dynamic range where you just have synths like going backwards and forwards there without the fullness of everything else, deliberately boosting the resonant frequencies and mid-range of some instruments to then have the drums come in and sidechain on top of, just to kind of show that it's still that loud. There's just a lot of really cool ideas within this album that are presented in a way that helps rather than hinders. But yeah, honestly, thematically though, typically major or minor oriented there. Sometimes we kind of roll with some modal stuff, and occasionally there's extensions within the chord progressions, but we were typically diatonic. We had I think we had a minor, to be fair. There was like a minor kind of like brass section with like a major chord progression or a key signature there that was kind of a little bit like surreal, but that's on purpose. Again, I don't take anything that's been presented here to be by accident, because we clearly know what we're doing. So ultimately, I just think, again, thematically, they typically reflected the mood, or like a nuance of the mood, you know. Some of this was minor because we clearly were struggling. Some of it was major, but the instruments sort of like dictated that, even though, especially with how kind of beautiful the end of Peppermint was, or like the midpoint of Peppermint was, just again, we were suffering, but there was some beauty in the suffering, I suppose, in a weird way. We could potentially appreciate things were better than they were before, even if we were still having a rough time. The studio recording, mixing, and mastering though is quite well handled. I like the way that things in general are presented with the vocals, even though I didn't get all those clearly. Most of them came through clearly. I think that the filtering and the EQing decisions, the way that they're kind of resonant, the high range kind of makes it almost seem like a phone call with someone. There was some adjustments and pitch shifting and modulations of those to kind of stylize them and either make them more of a faux lead or kind of adjust the way that they're presented with either like a more straightforward cadence or sort of tone, or like we're kind of switching it up or putting it on the sides there. The panning decisions are cool. The automation as well of like the panning of other elements such as the synth pads, the way the drums move around. Some synths kind of were in the center and then spread around. We just got some really cool sound design decisions. There were also some resonant frequencies, but very occasional, and it was more of a mixed decision rather than a master one. Like, it wasn't a mistake. Stuff was typically niched quite well within the frequency spectrum though. Bit of pumping with some of the drum parts, bus compression limitings handled, and nice and low when it needed to, but also dynamic range compositional as well as production wise. No applicable constructive critique from me. I think ultimately, again, from a final general listener's perspective, I do feel for Ybenfy. I hope that they're getting the help that they need, because it seems like they've gone through a hell of a lot. But it's also one of those situations where I think music can be incredibly therapeutic, and I think it's important for people to sort of discuss that and to be able to be comfortable to sort of express themselves without being judged for it. I wish Ybenfy all the best of luck for the release of this album, Who Hurt You, because thank you for watching my review of this album titled Who Hurt You by Ybenfy. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via their various social medias and their SoundCloud page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time. It's need to help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next SB Reacts. Spiderhands out.